Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Candid Conversations about Network Marketing. Hi, I'm BK. And as usual, on the other end, we have Dr. Wayne. Hi, Dr. Wayne.
Hi, BK. Hi, everyone.
So, we are excited about this morning's episode because I saw the show notes with Dr. Wayne and I kind of know what so I don't even have to ask him that question, what are we going to talk about? Because I know we have show notes today.
We do.
So, Doc, aren't you happy that I don't have to ask you this question today?
I like it actually. I was starting to get used to it. But we have these PDF notes that I've put together so that we can have something to give to those who may be interested. I suppose you might like to talk about that, BK. It's just an added extension that we'd like to offer to people if they'd like.
Yeah, sure. Sure, we want to make it accessible to everyone. Like we were saying, we are just talking about it just now before we started that, it might be a good point of reference to have something to refer to. So do connect with us on our website at networkmarketerpodcast.com and we can send you the show notes so that you can follow along as you listen to this as well. Okay? So, Doc, I know we're going to continue with our most favorite topic of I know it's an oxymoron, most favorite, right? Uh, topic of the day, which is motivation, right?
Yeah. So what I thought I'd do this time is Um, I get a lot of questions asked about, how does the mind then influence the physical body? So what I'd like to do is continue on and just go through some of the things we spoke about last week, just in terms of highlighting them. And of course, if you want to find out more about it, you can go back to the podcast we did last week. We're just going to touch on that initially. And then what we're going to do then is go through the ancient medicine's philosophy in terms of where these emotions, which organ they actually then can is involved, and then what happens with the pathways that then actually, unfortunately, uh, become challenged. But I use the word unfortunate because when you know what's going on, it is actually fortunate. It was actually a great opportunity to actually understand more about what's happening to your body. So this particular one's really going deeper into looking at one particular um, stressor that we all feel, or one particular uh, element of of thinking that happens to all of us, and that's basically lack of motivation. And then digging deeper into how it affects the human body, and it's in line with from ancient medicine. The phrase is the cause to all disharmony, the cause to all disease, the cause to all of lack of wealth, the cause to all of, unfortunately, people who don't have good relationship, whether it be with partners or family or friends, is known as, from an ancient medicine perspective, is known as the mistake of the intellect. Western medicine calls it another way, they phrase it another way, and they've only really learned this in the last 10 to 15 years. And I know we've spoken about this many times, but some people there's quite a few people who are new on, and I just want to go through this a little bit as well. Western medicine call it there's 90% of our subconscious was programmed prior to the age of 7. And I like ancient medicine's way of using the phrase, the cause to all disharmony, cause to all disease is a mistake of the intellect, because that allows us to look at things from a positive perspective. So now that we've got that bit over there, did you want to come in there anything with that, BK?
Yeah, today we're gonna we're gonna walk through the topic of motivation in a very different way. At least I've never encountered it before myself, right? Because we finally can talk about some of the inner workings of our body, right? Like the Dr. We're gonna talk about this in a bit, where it is kind of like a very comprehensive approach to motivation. Um, it can stem from something within us, something that Dr. Wayne will address in a bit, which is something in our body that may not be. I think it's also like it feeds off each other, right? So if
Yeah,
you are not motivated, then a part of your body becomes in a state of dis-ease, right?
yeah,
Discomfort, right? And then at the same time, if that particular organ is in a state of disease, then you also can find a lack of motivation as well.
Yes, spot on. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so just recapping what we went through a little bit last week. So motivation, just coining or putting a phrase around it. So motivation is the desire to act in service of a goal. It's the crucial element in setting and attaining one's objectives. And research shows that people can influence their own levels of motivation and self-control. And we also went through, however, the problem with the human mind or the human being is that we don't like change, and we actually fear change. And this is why most of us basically find, like about 95% of us go through life and we really don't change that much. And we used some really good examples last time as well. And we also then went through the three important concepts with regards to motivation. We looked at the immutable law, the law of vibration. And this law, immutable, means it can't be changed. I think I got that a little bit mixed up last time, but we fixed it. But the immutable means it can't be changed. And this is the third of the universal laws. It tells us that nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. And we used gravity as an example to explain that in more detail, and how even though it's an immutable law, like gravity, if we use it in favor, we can then actually fly. Okay, so it's not as if these immutable laws can't be transcended, is the words that we would like to use. Then we went into the law of attraction, and even though the law of attraction is not mentioned in any of the universal laws, this law of attraction is basically a law of the universe which runs through all of the 7 universal laws. And if you want to find more about these universal laws, we've got a great, what's it called, the 5 hidden reasons why most people fail at network marketing and how you can change that. And we've got that available if you want to look deeper into these universal laws. And we also then went into the important aspect of the law of attraction. Even though it's an important law, the most important law of all is the law of resistance. And we went into that in detail as well. And then we went into the 9 ways to increase motivation. So once again, if you want to listen to more about that, if you missed it, it's in our prior podcast. Now, what I want to go through today is, what creates this lack of motivation, and what can it do to the physical body, as we mentioned. The interesting thing, motivation from an ancient medicine, traditional Chinese medicine philosophy, is mainly a liver and gallbladder congestion. So it can be an energy congestion, which then can manifest and keep on going into more physical conditions, as I'll talk about shortly. And it can be then more in terms of dampness. Now, I talk a lot about this in terms of other webinars that I've done, but think of it like when we're in a developing fetus, we're basically 90% salt water. So think of this pristine salt water as being an azure blue, absolutely looks crystal, and it just looks lovely, and it basically then has an abundance of health, like this beautiful child that's now being born, still has this huge amounts of salt water, pristine. And then unfortunately, as we get older, it then creates this dampness. And this dampness can actually come around even earlier in our lives. And I'll talk about how that happens shortly. But when it's more to do with, in traditional Chinese medicine, when it's got more to do with the liver and gallbladder in its initial stages, it's more to do with just an energy blockage. So think of it like you might want to do some exercise. You want to do this exercise, and if you just basically push through, you do the exercise, you enjoy it, you come out the other end and you're motivated because of that. And if you keep doing that, the lack of motivation then dissipates, okay? So this energy, we call it qi in Chinese medicine, when it's just in a liver qi blockage, so to speak, when it's stuck, you can move through it. However, when it becomes damp, something different happens. And this dampness then can accumulate. It can even accumulate in joints, and I'll move more into this further into this webinar, which joints and where and its muscles as well. And it can create manifest itself in joint pain, and you may find that this gets even worse in rainy weather, for example, and this can then lead to lack of motivation. But this particular lack of motivation is more in lack of mental clarity, fogginess, forgetfulness, just feeling of sluggishness and inability to be focused. And this then extends into just unable to start tasks. And you just got this slow, cloudy, hazy mental feeling. And it doesn't matter what you do, it seemingly doesn't go away, unfortunately. And it just stays there. And this is the one that really we become stuck in. And if it moves into this dampness, and we'll go through ways that the body becomes damp quite shortly. But I just want you to understand the two different concepts. Now, there are others, but these are the main two. So just looking at motivation, when it is stuck in the liver, for example, what can then happen? It can go from an energetic blockage to now more other emotions. So other emotion turmoil can now, unfortunately, be a part of this. So now, if it's more a gallbladder emotion, it's more to do with resentment and stubborn and emotionally repressed, depressed, indecisive. If it's more liver, it's more to do with anger and agitation and irritation, frustration and aggression. So if this motivation, lack of motivation, isn't then moved, it then goes deeper into the energetic systems of the liver and gallbladder. So I'll just stop there. BK, anything you want to feedback there for me, mate?
I do have a quick question. I mean, it's going to sound like the which came first, the chicken or the egg question,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
Is it the physical symptoms that cause the lack of motivation, or the lack of motivation that causes the physical symptoms? I guess I think this is going to be a tough question in a way. Sorry about that.
No, it's not. It depends. It's both. It can be both. And typically what happens is we should, like if we look at the actual triggers to why these occur, and the four triggers are what we eat and drink. So, for example, if we're eating foods that are known liver, gallbladder challenges, you're eating more foods that are, say, alcohol-based, or you're eating foods that are dairy, that think of stodgy foods. The more stodgy the food, the more it becomes damp as well. So that could be too much rice, that could be too much dumplings, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Think of, just chips, dairy, just think of that stodgy food. So it can come from the food. It can also come from, unfortunately, stress. Stress itself will do it. So, just external stresses that may have nothing to do with you, but you've got involved with that stress. Then it becomes you because of the way we react. The next one then is a chemical or some sort of, even a virus or a bacteria can cause it as well. And even though the virus and bacteria is gone, it can leave us with this lack of motivation. And then it can come down to just lack of movement, for example. So it is a chicken and an egg in terms of where does it start. But generally what happens is something in those four areas basically then creates the energy stagnation. But then the problem is lack of motivation when it's stuck in the liver or in dampness, then has a feedback loop that creates more lack of motivation within the liver and gallbladder as well, and then creating more dampness throughout the body.
Well, I think in light with all the ways that all the episodes that we have done so far, I think one of the things that we have been trying to communicate or address is that when you know something, you then can act on it, right?
Yes.
So we are hoping that through all these episodes that we have been doing, we bring awareness to an issue. So like some of the things that Dr. Wayne just mentioned just now, if once you know what causes some of these negative feedback loops, you can start addressing them, and then it helps you to undo, and then maybe to bring you to a more positive feedback loop as well, right? So one thing we can do for sure is changing the way we handle or the way we choose our food, right? And eat a cleaner plate in a sense. And I think that helps us to be motivated in our business as well. Now, remember, this podcast is about helping us to become better, more professional, network marketers and to grow our business. So of course we know that motivation is definitely one of the key things that we need to address. And who knew until today, right? That the kind of meals that we are choosing could be the reason why we are not at the highest ranks that we hope to achieve, right?
Yeah, yeah. And let's just put this into an example. For example, someone came to me a few weeks ago and we were talking about this very thing, you know, motivation. And unfortunately, what happens with network marketers, especially if you're a full-time network marketer, even part-time, what happens if we get a knockback, think of that as the stress. So now we're getting stressed and we're not used to being knocked back, so to speak, and we take that as a negative. Initially we do, until we become stronger in our own emotional resilience. And then what then happens is, because we feel down due to our what we would do as a young person, we might then go to the fridge, and then we might actually choose, I'll have a glass of wine and I'll have now some cheese and crackers with that. And from what we've just learned now, what that's doing is actually creating more lack of motivation. Or we might go, I'll do that, and tomorrow morning I'll get up and I'll go to exercise. But because we maybe overindulged that night, with maybe your intention was to have one glass, but you had two or three, not really overindulged, but just enough to take an edge off you the next morning. And then the next morning you wake up and you don't want to exercise. And this then creates more stodginess, more dampness, and then unfortunately the motivation becomes more and more set in the body. So as network marketers, because we do have more time, especially the full-time network marketer, we have to be very aware of what's going into our body, because there's another saying from ancient medicine that says the light of the universe, or think of clarity, think of pristine thought, motivation, you've got everything. The light of the universe will not enter if the body is impure. We have to look at the body as the vessel that allows the mind. And even now, ancient medicine has been saying it for thousands of years, and Western medicine has just gotten onto it in the last 10 or so years, that the digestive system basically allows us to have happy hormones. This first part of the small bowel basically makes serotonin and tryptophan. These are our happy hormones. The bowel produces other bacteria. Other bacteria in the bowel then actually creates memory and helps us with memory in that as well. So, you know, just from what we've said, hopefully, as BK mentioned, that once we understand this, we can then have choice, and therefore change gets easier. The reason we fear change is because we don't know how to move forward. And that's the idea of this podcast, is putting things into simple concepts that are really, if you look at it at the end, it's a huge concept to grasp, but hopefully putting together simple concepts that allows you then to take action and take steps to move forward out of motivation. Now, just looking at the liver, and just something from a traditional Chinese medicine point of view, the liver is known as the general of emotion. So think of stress that will come into stress will always come into us. And remembering an interesting perception, there is no such thing as stress. It's our perception that creates stress. So, for example, they've proven this. You get a child, 18-month-old child, and they put them into a room of venomous snakes. Non-venomous snakes. These snakes will crawl all over the child, and the child will just brush them off, and there's no fear. You do the same with spiders, and the child will just brush them off. Most children don't have. The only fear that sometimes children are born with is the fear of heights, but it's only 0.01% or 1%. It's not much. Whereas most children will look at a flight of steps and go, "Yep, I can go down there," and boom, 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 and of course hurt themselves. So we're not born with fear. We're not born with emotional challenges, so to speak. What happens is we learn them. And that's why, from an ancient medicine perspective, there's no such thing as these emotions. We basically create them in our body. So the liver then decides. So say, for example, an emotion comes in, and this emotion is lack of motivation. So we know that now that this is a gallbladder liver emotion on its simple energetic scale. And what it'll do then, it will sit in the liver. If more and more lack of motivation resolves or becomes a part of that person, it sits heavier and heavier in the liver. and then it can create other types of problems. And if these emotions are sit there for long periods of time, then it actually creates acidity in the liver. When there's more acidity in the body, then it creates free calcium that floats around in the tissues. So now the pineal gland can't work properly. The pineal gland actually becomes calcium salt starts going on the pineal gland. And now we really have this is more serious problems. Now our memory starts becoming a challenge. This free calcium then can even go into arteries. So now we're not wanting to go out there and exercise because our arteries become congested. Then it creates bone spurs and osteoarthritis, gallstones, kidney stones. It then can create all these different problems within the body just from a simple thing that could have been dispersed. Now, I'm not talking this happens within 5 years, 10 years. This happens when I'm talking about this free calcium affecting the pineal and bones, etc., and causing kidney and gallstones. This takes a number of years, number of decades. But I just want you to see how this then moves through the body quite extensively. And these emotions then move through what I call the 4 firemen or the 4 filters in the body. So if it's more digestive system, it's more to do with worry. It's more liver, we've already learned that. If it's more immune system, it's more worthiness. If it's more kidney, it's more fear. So each one of these firemen or filters, which we'll go through in more detail in other podcasts, we just haven't got time to go through it tonight, will then actually create other emotional ups and downs and upheavals as well. And just once again, just going back to this concept, the liver is the general. And if, for example, worry comes in, it can then actually tighten the neck muscles. If there's more impulsiveness that comes in, it can cause stomach cramps. If there's more depression, it can affect, and I'll go into more depression, what it'll affect shortly, it can affect different muscles of the quads and hamstrings, for example. If it's excessive joy, it can affect the intercostal muscles and the rib cages, for example, and even the heart. So every emotion that comes in, the liver filters it and then goes, okay, where am I going to disperse it? Which part of the filter system in my body needs to look at this emotion and then hopefully disperse it if that filter or fireman is actually strong enough. Okay, so I'll probably stop there, BK, and see if there's anything there you might want to chime in with.
So from a person who did science in school, right? Not that what we're saying is not science, but I'm just trying to make sense of it for myself as well as maybe some of the audience who's listening in. In a way, our emotions are chemical responses, right, Doc?
Yeah.
So to put it in perspective for myself, in a way, right, is that how the liver, when we have a certain feeling, whether is it happiness or sadness or anger, I guess it triggers certain chemicals in the body.
Or you could think of frequency. Remember we talked about frequency.
Or frequency, right? Yeah. So it kind of responds in that way, and therefore the organ that is responsible for taking care of all these things would be the liver.
Yes. In terms, the liver is the general. So it receives the frequency, and then we can say, okay, because of that frequency, then it actually creates a hormonal response, or a neurotransmitter response in terms of Western medicine words. But it then creates this frequency, and then the liver goes, oh, that frequency is fear. Please don't quote me on these numbers, I just can't remember. But say frequency resonates at 53 hertz, for example. You're a liver, you're a kidney emotion, so I'm going to send you the kidney so the kidney then can deal with it. Now, if the kidney can't deal with it, then the kidney is going to then actually firstly put it into the connective tissue, then it goes into the muscles, then it goes into the blood. So then it actually has got this sequence of how the kidney now deals with that. And if it can't deal with it, then it creates problems in those areas, connective tissue, muscle, blood, etc.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Doc.
Pleasure. So from there, since we're talking about lack of motivation, and as mentioned, if lack of motivation stays in the body for too long, it can then create anger and depression and anxiety. And say, for example, this now sits in the liver. And the liver doesn't know what to do because it hasn't got the energy. It's getting too much of the wrong foods, too much stress. The bacteria in the gut is really out of balance, and it's creating too many toxins and endotoxins coming through the liver. Now what happens now is these emotions, especially depression, will then enter the abdominal muscles. So then your core strength starts to go. It can then enter the hips, especially the inner thigh muscles. It can then go on to the quads, the top muscles, and even into the different butt muscles as well. It then can even enter the knee, the muscles around the knee as well. And it basically then can even cause muscle cramps. And so now what happens is, as the liver chi becomes a challenge, everything I just said occurs. Then what happens then it enters the muscles. And then what happens, as said, it then enters the blood flow. So then it can create, so the liver then looks after things like headaches and sleep challenges. It nourishes the eyes. The liver looks after, in Chinese medicine, energy. But you're able to get through the day, but you might be tired. The liver then looks after thyroid and blood sugar, even diabetes challenges. Liver, of course, looks after gallbladder. The liver looks after any type of, as mentioned, with regards to the muscles and cramps, and any type of fat that's developing around the middle. But it's not bad, but it's just this fat that a person finds it very difficult to release. Also looks after hormones. Liver looks after detoxification and also red blood cells as well. So from there, as mentioned, what happens, the liver goes from this simple energetic disturbance of lack of motivation, and if it's not freed up, then it can go deeper into from the energy of the emotion, then into the muscles and connective tissue, then into the blood, and then can circulate. In Western medicine, if we want to use, for those people listening, we could use inflammatory mediators like cytokines and interleukins. So it's interesting because I can look at both sides. Western medicine uses these huge, big words, and ancient medicine uses these a lot more simpler and a lot more simpler understanding. So hopefully what you can see now is that just by simply not getting on top of your motivation, and hopefully we've shown you ways on how to do this, you can then move through your motivation so it doesn't have to be stuck. And now you know what to look for if it is stuck. So if you've got headaches, you immediately know that it's to do with the liver. If you immediately know it's got to do with the liver, you immediately now know it's got to do with those emotions we talked about. Maybe lack of motivation. Your business isn't going to where you want it to go because you're just stuck. Your dampness has basically come in. You've got a lot more muscle aches and pains. All these things are occurring because you're unable to move through. So one of the answers I'd like to allow you to see, and we're once again in our 5 hidden reasons we talk about, in other podcasts we talk about it as well. And this is being the silent witness. And what we mean by this is, while I'm sitting here, I'm trying to visualize myself from a corner looking down and being the silent witness. And when you are in a lack of motivation state, our goal is to become neutral. So and what we mean by this is it's called the 3 R's. Don't react to it. You become neutral. What I would rather you look at is you respond and then you release. So it might be initially, I have lack of motivation. Don't react to that. Respond to it and then get up and do some exercise. Or, hey, I've got lack of motivation. Respond to that. Now, I'm not going to go to the fridge and have the alcohol and the cheeses and the damp foods that we've spoken about, and then release and look at that food. And what I suggest there is you find that emotion that's sitting there and find that food or whatever you may be doing that you know now is negative, that could be creating more of your lack of motivation. Sit in that in meditation and release it. And that's what we mean by release it. And the universal positive emotion is unconditional love. So if you can sit in that with unconditional love, you'll then actually find your frequencies will then lift, because remembering everything is a frequency. Lack of motivation is a frequency. Where we want to get to is unconditional love. And if we can lift that through motivation and then do the actions required, then what happens is the vessel becomes clean, the mind becomes clean, motivation comes back, and your network marketing business can then go to another level.
So, Doc, sorry. So, Doc, what happens if something happens? I mean, you encounter an event, and we are human beings, right? So we do react, or
Yes.
as in we get worked up, we get a bit agitated, we get a bit upset about something. Does it count as a reaction, or can we undo that reaction? What can we do?
So the first thing is to, as the 3 R's basically suggest, is don't react. And so generally what happens is we immediately react to anything that happens. We don't think about that reaction. What we have to do is basically act. I know it's difficult when you're not used to doing it, but for example, if you are walking upstairs and walking into your home, for example, you've had a big day, you walk inside and something happens, the dog races up to you, or one of the children have left something in front of you and you nearly fall over, you can then, if you're not used to doing this, your reaction can be negative. But if you look and go, oh, gee, they must have had fun today. Look at what they've done. You've got a split decision to make a decision. That's where you respond. And this is what we mean by try to be in this silent witness state all the time. I know it's difficult, but the more you meditate, the more you understand where we're coming from this, and the more you put it into practice. It's the same, I suppose, BK. Hey, BK, I've never gone to the gym before. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run a marathon, and then I've got to warm up. I'm going to run a marathon, and then after that, I'm going to do an hour in the gym. You're going to be wasted. You're not even going to do an hour of running. I know that was extreme, but it's the same with our emotions. What we're used to doing is basically just thinking that this emotion is ours. And what we've got to do is, no, it's not ours. Basically refrain from thinking that way, refrain from reacting to it, and respond and release it. And this can only happen if you put into practices the things that we've spoken about all the way through this, is making sure you have your DMO, one of your DMO, your daily method of operation is one of the first things you do is you meditate, you sit still. And then even during the day, you try and do things that allows you to become the silent witness.
Because I've been working so closely with Dr. Wing, I've been used to all these ideas that he has been talking about, and I'm trying to practice them myself. So I just want to share with everyone that's listening in that is about taking the first step, right? So I was just sharing with him, I think a couple of days ago, that at least nowadays, I'm aware that I am feeling such things, right? So the silent observer is maybe a step slower. I can still feel the reaction, but at least I know I'm aware that I am feeling something like that I shouldn't be, and then I can address it.
Correct.
Right? So I'm give yourself some space and some room to grow, just like what Dr. Wayne mentioned just now. You don't tackle a marathon on day one, right? You start training, you do a 2 kilometer, then a 5, and then a 10, So for me now, my silent observer exercise for myself at least is that I am more aware of the things that I feel from a moment to moment kind of situation, and I can grow to kind of adjust and change. And then, okay, I know I feel this way when something happens like this. I can make adjustments, right? So have faith, have hope. It doesn't happen overnight, and just like some of the problems that we are addressing now, it doesn't happen simply because you felt angry one time and then you have all these issues. It kind of accumulates. I think I was just listening to an audible the other day as well. And, we all we're not very sure whether it should be credited to Einstein, but everyone seems to credit it to him. The eighth wonder of the world, which is compounding. Compounding works both ways. It works both in your favor and against you, right? Against your favor, right? So all these things that we talked about today, start taking small steps and it compounds. And if you can do it on a daily, consistent basis, it compounds. It compounds greatly in your favor. But if you do not do them, then again, it also compounds negatively in your favor. So I think that's one of the wonderful things that we know. We know human beings, we can make changes, be it small changes at first, but it will compound. And if you consistently do it over time, it compounds greatly.
Very true, BK.
So that was a very, very interesting episode and a very different angle at motivation. I don't think we have ever, at least I haven't encountered it in this way before. So thank you, Dr. Wayne, for pointing us to some of the inner workings of our body. I think it's been fascinating. I must tell the audience, that I'm Chinese. I'm very used to all these concepts of dampness and heatiness, and Dr. Wayne explains it better than anybody I've ever encountered before. I always joke with him that he's more Chinese than I am. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This has been an interesting episode. If you do want the show notes, do connect with us at our website, which I'll link over. If you're watching the video, you can see it, but if not, it is at networkmarketerpodcast.com. Let me say that again. Is connect with us at networkmarketerpodcast.com. Yeah, you can connect with us and get the show notes for today. All our archive episodes are there as well. And of course, if you do want to dive a little bit deeper into some of these things that we talked about, like the universal laws and some of the things that we address, like a mistake of the intellect, which I really love the words, right? The concept at least. Do connect with us and do look us up at 5 Hidden Reasons. The 5 is a numerical 5. So numerical 5, hiddenreasons.com, where we talk about why most network marketers fail in this industry and why you shouldn't have to. So with that, again, thank you, Dr. Wayne, and thank you everyone for joining us. Do subscribe, to add us, to check us out in all these various places that we have. And we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thanks, BK. Thanks, everyone.